Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin with a first alert that you saw first on our news app. The state Supreme Court has declined outright to take a challenge to the state's school voucher programs.
That means the legal challenge would first have to work its way through the lower courts. As we reported, the petition was filed on behalf of taxpayers and funded by the Minocqua Brewing Company's Super PAC. It claims private school vouchers are gutting funding for Wisconsin public schools and asked the High Court to halt the programs. After the petition was filed, Governor Tony Evers and Assembly Speaker Robin Vos both said the legal challenge should begin in the circuit courts, not at the Supreme Court level.
The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, which intervened to defend the choice programs, issued a statement which reads in part, the unanimous court was right to reject the case. If choice opponents try again, Will stands ready to defend these critical programs for Wisconsin children and their families, end quote.